Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are in the world. Welcome back to Primer Chat with Audrey D. Lloyd and Dr. Sam D. Webster. Here at Primer Chat, we prime you for success. Today, we're going to be talking about a very valuable subject around feedback, delivering feedback. So before I get too far, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Webster, to sort of get us going on the topic of feedback.
Well, today I want to focus not just on feedback, but more constructive criticism and how we go about delivering it. How do you accept it? Because it takes two. There's always one on the delivery side and one on the accepting side, and whether you accept it or not is a whole different thing. Both personal and business, you always have to give some kind of constructive criticism at some point in your career or in your life. And how do you do that without making the other person feel bad or making it feel like it's a genuine feedback that you're just not giving it? Because we talked about the engineered feedback that they're giving you for an ulterior motive. So let's talk about that. Do you have an example of a good feedback that you got or that somebody gave to you and you thought it was very well done?
Well, yes. And I wanted to say this before you get going, that I think it's very important to call out, you're right, with feedback, there is the giver or the sender of the feedback, and then the recipient or the receiver of the feedback. And I think both have a role to play in the process. That many times, especially in the business realm, we put heavy emphasis on delivering the feedback, but we don't hear so much about how to process feedback that you've received. So I'm going to go to your question in regards to good feedback that I have seen. So I'm a big safety person. I always admire when leaders are in companies and they can get people's attention around safety. So the STAR method, which we all know, is really when you see something in action, something that's happening, that you stop the person, you acknowledge what it is that the person is doing, what you like, right? And you recognize that person. I think that's a great example of positive feedback. And it could also be when there's an opportunity, like you're going up a ladder and maybe you shouldn't be putting the ladder there. You want to get the person's attention, like, hey, can I show you something? This is dangerous. Perhaps we don't do this because if this happens, you could fall, right? So you're not waiting, it's in the immediacy of getting the person's attention. But that's a very small microcosm, right? Example of how feedback can actually work.
Yeah, but on the receiving side, just like you're doing the recognition and doing the STAR method, what do you do on the receiving side of that when you're getting the feedback from someone? Do you check off, oh, they're using the STAR method, or do you just
No, I mean, I think, again, it's the STAR method, but I think for the person who gets it in the immediate moment is one, what you're doing is going to be memorable. Number one, I remember what I was doing when that person saw me or that person approached me, right? And to get when the person's recognizing what it is that you're doing good or that could be improved, they're putting you in the game. You're already in the game, right? They're acknowledging, and part of acknowledgement is not just telling, but allowing the person some space also to speak back, because it's always a two-way thing, right? And then recognizing that was great or that was an opportunity to improve. If you would have done this, perhaps you could have retained that customer. Maybe that customer would have left, right? More inspired or happier. Or maybe that was an opportunity where you could have cross-sold that customer, upsold that customer, right? Or told that customer something where they want to come back quicker, right? As opposed to going away mad or whatever. So it's, again, both sides have a responsibility in that moment.
let's talk about the place I know in business where I either give or receive feedback a lot, and that's during appraisal time. Whenever that end of year comes and you have to write out, there's a process. In most companies, if you've worked in corporate, there's a process of giving that leads up to the feedback, getting the feedback or giving the feedback. And usually you have to write out all the things you did for the year, both good. Most people just write out the good, honestly. Most appraisals that I look at, you as the one who's doing the appraising have to give, oh, but you also did this, because everything is going to be perfect. You ran the company single-handedly. Everything's embellished. When I get an appraisal, I'm like, oh my God, why isn't this guy like the CEO? Because it's so, over the top and well written. And you, as the person who have to assess that and then decide which one is right, you have to go do the investigation. Which one is true, which one is not, which one's embellished, which one's right on point. But work has to be done there. So by the time you get to the person to give them the feedback, you have like knowledge of what's going on. So you can then say, I told you I like the sandwich method. And that's an old Toastmasters. Tell them what's good, give them the constructive criticism, and then finish it with something good again. So when I start off, I like to say, Audrey, you were great this year, or I think you did some great things this year. Let's talk about those. Your project for so and so was on point. It came in at whatever response rate we wanted. We're not talking about all the stuff that goes bad, right? We're just going to give you all the good stuff. It came in, really rocked it. Thank you very much. You go to 2 or 3 incidents that you were good. You came in to work on time every day, whatever it was. Let's talk about where you could improve. Now, I'm not going to make it a negative, because when you say to somebody, you didn't do this well, or these are things I didn't like, already you see that whole wall goes up. Oh, you didn't like it because of this and this and that. So these are things you could improve. You did this well. However, if you had just done this one other thing, you would have made it a lot better. Your campaign was correct, but we did get it out late. So even though we got good responses, we would have had better responses. It's a bitter pill that you want them to swallow. Like, yes, I told you your campaign was good. I'm not taking that away from you. However, that word always, right? But and a however, however, could have been better. Let's talk about that in the next campaign to see what we could do to fix that. But I think people take that a lot better. I know I do. When you don't feel like, oh, you just totally, after all I did with that wonderful campaign, they're gonna bring up this little little thing. Because I've heard people say that. Oh, look at my review, look at my appraisal. I did all this good stuff, but they're gonna point out the one bad thing. So you have to be able to receive criticism as well as to give it.
Yes. So you said a lot of really great things. So I love what you said, but I would also add to that yes, year-end conversations are very important, but I think along the way, all year long, really, you should be speaking with your person you report to, your team, your partners, to know where is the opportunity, what's going great, right? So that's the whole plus delta. What am I doing great? Where are the opportunities? But also what I hear you dialing up is that in feedback, there's a delineation between what you did, but how you did it. What you did, technical, how you did it, interpersonal, right? And the other thing is to lead with not taking a personal stance per se when you're providing the feedback, unless it's a personal interaction, interpersonal issue that you have with the person. If it's not an interpersonal issue that you have with a person, it's always best to weigh in on the side of the collective of what the business needs to do, what the company needs to do. And usually, of course, the company has objectives and goals, and then the companies usually has behaviors or a cultural norm of how we operate. So when you provide the feedback within the context of whether or not you were saying with the campaigns, did you meet it on time or didn't you meet it on time, right? That goes to the goal, right? But a little bit also towards the how. Because if we say that we're people that execute, right, seamlessly execute or executing as one, whatever it is that you say that that's the thing that the company is aligning to and that we do great, the feedback should be, based on that. And then it's a little bit more not as personal, even though you're delivering it in a personal way. It's not just about my standards, but it's about the agreed upon standards of the culture. But let me stop there because that's a lot just to be said.
So, is there a process? Do you think is there a process? I know I have a process of giving feedback, and I learned that in the corporate world. Some of it I
Yeah,
learned on my own, but I learned quite a lot of it in corporate America because you always had to be doing appraisals,
right,
reviews every year. That's part of how you get your raise. We were joking about the engineered criticisms.
correct.
How do you explain that? Explain that to me of when someone is engineering your feedback.
Mhm. So, right. So offset, we talked about that you could be authentic, sincere, and reasonable feedback, which is usually, one grounded in something that's real, something that are observing, something that needs to change, something that as a leader, in your heart with intention, this person, there's an opportunity for them to get better. Engineered feedback, I think, is like, when you engineer something, you're making it happen. You're looking for things. Perhaps you're putting together a somewhat of a case, right? Or there's an element of the truth that's there, but maybe that's blown up to be a little bit bigger. And sometimes there's intentionality that's behind there. There's a reason why you're doing that. Maybe you don't necessarily, for whatever reason, want that person on your team. Or maybe for whatever
The
reason, you think that person's a great performer.
Sorry.
So you're
The
building
opposite is
evidence.
true too. The
The opposite.
opposite is also true.
Yes.
You
Go
might
ahead.
want that
Go what?
person off
Go
your
ahead.
team.
You want, okay. So thank you. You might want the person off the team. Correct. Is that what you're saying? You want them to move on naturally?
Yes. And there are a lot of ulterior motives when people give you feedback. Sometimes you have to try to deduce what it is. Sometimes you just think it's you, and somebody else might deduce what it is. And I'll give you an example. I was staying in this role for quite a while, and I kept getting these glowing feedbacks. And I know a lot of Black women, and I'm going there with it, a lot of Black women in the corporate world get fantastic feedbacks and reviews, but they don't get promoted. And I used to wonder, if I did such a great job, why am I not getting promoted? And I asked someone who said, Sandi, no one wants to lose you off the team. And I've heard that other friends who said they got similar feedback. Like,
Mm.
you do such a great job. If you leave, my butt would be out in a minute. So I need that person to stay there to run things for me. And so if I get her a promotion, was that going to leave me? And it's a selfish thing. I think it's a really selfish thing, but I know for a fact that it's happened. Has anything like that has ever happened to you, or have you heard of anything like that?
Well, I think what you're saying, surely, I mean, it comes down to, yes, we want you on the team, but we don't necessarily want you to be the captain of the team, right?
You're
Yeah,
good in the position that you're playing.
right. Right. And I think, I will say that many leaders have different ways of operating. That doesn't sound to me strange from the standpoint that I have encountered leaders that pick their players, so to speak, right? So they have people, I guess would say pegged for specific things. And they don't want to disrupt that apple cart of how they have people pegged because they feel like it's serving them. right? It's serving the role, it's serving the company, it's working well. So if it's working well, why disrupt it? But to your point, it is more heavy on the leader getting a benefit, the company getting the benefit, and depending on the person, because for some people, if the metric of their success is to feel needed, then that works. But if their metric of their success is to be paid and to be elevated, that will not work.
I find they will get paid. They will give you the money. They'll give you the great appraisal, but the title and the elevation doesn't come with it.
And for some people, that's not important. For some people, they're okay with that. They're okay with, you don't need to give me the title. You don't need to give me an office. I'll work from home. You don't need to give me a company car. You don't need to give me any of the above. Or
I,
for some, the metric could be as long as I have a job as well. So it depends on the individual.
yeah, but the feedback that is, do you consider that a genuine feedback or disingenuous? If someone's giving you the feedback with an ulterior motive?
Well, I think that brings us into when you're giving feedback, there should be some intentionality that's there. And the intentionality should come down to some kind of action or some type of an outcome, right? And a reason behind why you're giving the feedback. And I think we talked about the insight that you want the individual to get out of receiving the feedback. So do you want
What
that
is
person
the
to feel
outcome?
like, hmm?
What is the outcome? What do I want at the end of this? Both for you as the person getting the feedback, when you walk away, you should be saying, what am I going to do with this feedback? How is, first, do I feel this is a genuine, true feedback? And if so, how can I correct it or work to improve it so that the next time there might be a different issue, but it won't be this issue. I'll take care of this issue.
Right, because I mean, because if we think about it, feedback really loans itself to relationship, right? So if we are not in a relationship with someone, I don't even know what you would call it if you kind of just empty your thoughts. You're just telling them what you think. You're kind of like, I think the word is offloading, right? What you think. But with the feedback, to me, when you're in a relationship, you're providing that feedback so things will get better. It will be enhanced, either for the person, the company, the outcome. There's something that's there that you want to preserve and do a better job at doing it. You're investing in it. That's why you're taking your time to talk to that person, right? To figure it out together because you want to make sure that the relationship is going to be enhanced and the outcome is going to be enhanced.
What is your process for giving a feedback? I know my process, I break it up into little steps and I really prepare ahead of time before I give feedback. I try to understand what really is the project, what should have been that, what was the expected outcome for me if it's a project I gave someone to do. What did I expect this to be? Did it turn out well? Did it not? Again, were there parts? I start doing my analysis because that's how I think anyway. I'm a process person. But what are the good things? What are the things that missed the mark? And I break that up, like I said, into the sandwich method of giving them the stuff, good stuff first. When I get to the middle part, I always want to have additional steps after this meeting. So either I'm going to break down what you're doing into little components so that you have smaller deliveries and we can spot if something is off at that delivery point. So let's say you're supposed to do a PowerPoint. Let's say you're going to speak at some event and that's what I wanted for you. It's on your appraisal. You're really hooked up to it. You did it and you didn't deliver well. The words were great, but your delivery was bad. Happened to me. That's how come I could use that. And someone gave me the feedback to go to Toastmasters. I thought, what do you mean? I'm a great speaker. But my delivery, I was delivering a bunch of numbers, which is like the worst. So I was just reading it off, blah, 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 blah. I wasn't putting a story to how the numbers would help or would work. And so that delivery wasn't met well. But I did understand after she told me, like, oh, that was so boring and blah, blah, blah. I did take her advice and I went to Toastmasters. That taught me some of the actual methods of accepting feedback, which is a big thing. You have to learn to accept the feedback that you're giving as well as delivering it. And I've used that by breaking up your feedback into incremental deliverable pieces. So when we walk away from here, you're going to create the PowerPoint. Send me the outline of your PowerPoint, what you're going to talk about, so that I can see that you're talking about the right things. Have it to me by Monday. Monday, I can look at your outline and say, these three things are great. This one thing at the bottom is going to tick everybody off. Not saying not to say it, but you've got to give it a different name, or you've got to let people walk away saying you recognized it, but not tick them off. So let's do that. Gonna give me your next draft of their PowerPoint, and then you're going to do the talking points. We're going to rehearse that. So I'm giving them small, incremental, doable things, but I'm also following to make sure your end delivery, your end output is going to be what's expected. And for you, hopefully you're learning that this is making you better and you're getting input ahead of time. So that even if you blew up and things didn't go well, you knew you were on the right track, or someone else was on that right track with you. So I find for me that way of giving feedback helps a lot. It helps me because I don't have to sit in, one big project and put everything into it. I can do it a little bit at a time and make sure it comes in on time, make sure the person understands what I'm doing. And that's worked for me for quite a while. I'm probably a process person more than anything, but I like the process of giving that kind of feedback.
Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that I do observe is that many people, I talked about the star, giving the feedback in the moment. But I think that there is opportunity when people just give feedback without thought. Like they're just emotional about something and they just have had it and they just blow up. I'm going to tell that person how I feel. I think
I've done
feedback,
that quite a few times.
I think to be effective with feedback as a leader is to not make the feedback about so much you. Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought up the bit about speaking, right? That as a speaker, you and I know that when we're speaking, it's what we're saying is really not about us. We're giving value to the people who are listening. They're learning. And I think when you're giving feedback to an individual, the value is in that person learning, right? So is there value right now in me giving the feedback? If there's no real tangible value other than me feeling better about giving the feedback, perhaps I wait. Now, I'm not saying wait until it accumulates for you to blow up, but maybe it's not the right moment, right? Or maybe you need some more tangible examples before that feedback can become very effective. Then I think it's also being intentional about it, right? I'm going to give the feedback. Why, again, go back to why. Why am I give the feedback? What am I hoping to accomplish? And to be loose and agile when I provide it, because maybe I might learn something during the course of providing that feedback. That's where the insight comes in that I didn't know. Because maybe when I say something to Peggy or Pam, they're going to go, oh, I didn't even realize that you thought that way. Oh, you didn't realize that there's this that's happening. Oh, talk together, and I think you and I talked, previously, Sandy, about people you could discover something in the course of providing that feedback, that maybe it's a system issue, a process issue, that yes, the person should take accountability, but maybe it was not helping the person. So therein is a gap that maybe you could work together to solve, right? And to hear from the other side, because sometimes when we have perceptions, maybe our perception's wrong. Now, I know that sometimes when you're providing feedback, if someone counters it, it could sound very much like, for everything I say, they have an answer. But maybe they do have an answer. Maybe. And if they're coming across as they have an answer, okay, they're getting a defensive, right? Still, I would say just listen, right? Just listen to really understand, why is there a gap? And then again, as we talked about before, that feedback, that conversation that we're having, what is that driving towards? What is the action that person is going to take? What are they going to do different next time? What's their commitment to this? And then I think you said that earlier offline, what might they need from you to make it happen as
Yeah.
well?
And I try to ask that. What can I do to help? What do you need from me? And it's incumbent on you to tell me that when I ask that question. Or you should ask if I don't say it. Do you think getting feedback is different, or you accept it differently, or you argue back when money is involved? Let's say, I know in corporate, there's a difference between getting a 1 and a 2 and a 2 and a 3 or a 4 or a 5, whatever. There are grades of money that's attached to that. Now, if I get a 3, I don't get stock options. If I get a 2, that's a big difference. I might get some stock options with it. How well do you accept the feedback when you see money walking off the table and you feel like you're not at the good end of it?
Unfortunately, when we hear money, that can be a trigger to raise the stakes. And we know that when people raise the stakes, that, you know, emotions rise, pressure rises. But I think this is the opportunity, even though the sender, the person who's giving the feedback, has a responsibility, I think the spotlight now becomes on the receiver to beware, right? And to remember there's emotional intelligence that needs to accompany you in the seat, meaning you might not love everything that you're hearing, right? The stakes are high. You still do need to remember to have some diplomacy, because what I do and say is going to impact that other person. You know, how the whole, how an emotional intelligence works. We all know that, right? But if it is that I'm really trying to convince that person, persuade that person to give me perhaps more percentage or more money, that me being combative, especially when ego is involved, probably is not going to get me as far as I think, because it's going to shut that person down. So to keep a cool head and to negotiate your points, your value points, to make the point is probably going to be a better strategy than to just get upset or anxious because you're messing with my dollars here now, right? But
Oh,
it
yeah.
requires a little bit of pre-thinking as well. It requires that for the sender, but also for the receiver, if you know it's going to be a high-stake conversation, because it's important to you. The company's always going to, I shouldn't say always, I shouldn't stereotype, but more than likely for that later leader, they might have constraints. The
Yeah.
pot might not be as as expansive as we think.
Well, this is what I was going to say about having been in a position where you're told you can only give out 2 grades. The bulk of the people have to be in the middle, and you must give out. And so you're forced to give people to rationalize, even if this you had 5 great, but I have 5 great people. How can I tell 2 people that they're greater than the other 2, just even if I think they're all equal? But now I have to give feedback according to the grade that I've given. So what I've always done is I just tell them the truth. I think you're great, but I can only give two.
And again, hence we talked about engineering. Perfect example of where people might start engineering to justify, right? That they don't have the money to be able to reward that person. So they don't want to say anything that's really great. They're going to go more heavy on the opportunity areas when in fact, maybe that person is really great. You just don't have the money. Just tell them that.
Or I don't have the money in that pot. So what I typically do was I find other ways of incenting that person that might not be coming out of the salary budget line. There was one group of people that used to give gift cards. They used to have contests, but I knew that those gift cards were engineered to supplement the raise that the person
Yeah.
didn't get. They would win all these gift cards.
Looked like
And
enough. A lot in one go, right?
yes, and these were like $500, $1,000 gift cards that this person would get. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, this is how you equalize
Yes.
things when it doesn't work out according to how you need it, but you still need to motivate the person.
Correct.
So you learn all these little things when giving feedback.
So an envelope of $501 bills look more than giving five $100 bills. I mean, you know, just saying.
No, it's interesting the whole process of being. I've been both, and usually if you start to move up or you have your own business, you wind up being the position of having to be the giver as well as being the receiver.
Yeah.
Because if you have your own business, you're going to receive feedback from your clients,
Oh, yes.
good or bad, even more if it's bad. Even
And
more.
it's even sometimes more personal when you've created it as a creator or a small business owner because you had your lens when you did it. You thought it was so great. And then here comes someone looking at your site. I don't even know where to start. What are you trying to say here? And you're like, wait a minute.
But you get put you I learn more when I'm in the position of someone giving me feedback, and then I have to turn around and give a similar feedback to someone else. I'm like, oh my God, I have more understanding of the person who was giving me that feedback because now I have to do the same thing. So if you're in a manager role in corporate, that's the very in between role. You're managing people and somebody's managing you. So you're going to get it. The trickle down effect comes down from the top,
The cascade,
yeah,
right?
and the waterfall, stops at the bottom down there. So you're getting it. And sometimes you might want to change what you were going to tell the person that you're managing because of what you got.
Mm.
So I wasn't great. So my team can't all, three twos and ones because if I wasn't that great, how could my team be that great? But I really try to separate it out because if you did your best job for me, then you should be getting what you deserve. You might not get the compensation with it because the group as a whole, but I think you should get the accurate feedback of what you did well or of what you didn't do well as a team.
Yeah. No, this is very good. But as you're talking, what was coming up in my mind is that feedback really should try to get at the truth or the reality, right, of the situation. But that's not always, what can I say? It's not always clear because what might be my truth or my reality, right, might be a little bit different for the person who I am relating to. So that's where I come back to more understanding, trying to get to the understanding, because that's what feedback is all about, really, right? Is to try to get to the understanding of how can we close the gap? How can we make something better? And the feedback doesn't have to always be negative. The feedback can be very positive, right? Can be very positive, but it's usually because you want to see something more, right? I want to see more of that great work. I want to see a little bit less of the gaps that we have, the areas of opportunity. So the other thing we talked about is what about when the feedback is personal? Like it is personal.
Yeah, I've done some personal feedback and I've gotten some personal feedbacks. When I'm getting that feedback that I think is personal, the hair stands up on the back of your neck and you're like, this is your attitude is just very defensive in getting that feedback when you feel like this is personal. Even the words, you start dissecting the words that the person's saying, and you're all at to say, oh yeah, 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 I got your number on this. But you have to respond. You still have to respond to that. And it's very hard not to respond with a personal thing. I know it's hard for me anyway. You guys must be saints. But it's hard for me not to take that personally. And sometimes I'll call it out. Sometimes I'll say, that wasn't a team thing, that was me. So do you have a problem with me? And then that opens up a whole different kettle of fish and a different kind of conversation. But if I feel it's personal, I tend to think about why is it so personal? What is it that I'm doing that's rubbing you the wrong way as a personal, even if I'm doing the right thing? And Audrey, I've had someone say to me, you're a goody two-shoe. You always want to do the right stuff because that person didn't always want to do the right thing. And they were ticked that I'm always correcting or saying, no, we can't do that. That's a whole different kettle of fish altogether. And I
Mhm.
never thought of myself as a goody two shoes, but I don't like to do wrong things. If
Yeah.
you give me if you can't give me a rationale as to why that's the right thing to do, I can't go along with it.
So I think, with feedback, like with coaching, for example, sometimes during coaching, you might say to the client, can I give you some feedback? And maybe you give the feedback. And maybe the person says something that maybe it's not I shouldn't say that it's expected because in coaching you don't know what you're going to get, but maybe they say something that if with another lens you could take it a little bit personal, but you learn, let it roll off your back. It's like, okay, either way, it's neither right or wrong, good or bad. So I think that can extend, and it's not always easy to do because we're humans in feedback, whether you're giving it or receiving it, you get the difficult feedback, and I'm learning to be graceful. You know what I mean? To be graceful, to acknowledge that the person gave you the feedback. I mean, I think you said earlier to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would usually repeat, so I heard you say, and I acknowledge it, whatever way is going to work for you to acknowledge it, but to also leave time to process it. Because remember, feedback is like anything else. It's one person's perspective. So what I have learned to do, because you know yourself best, you've known yourself over time, is when people provide feedback, is to look at it in the cumulative. Do you hear any pattern? Do you see any pattern, hear any pattern to what that person says that might align with what you have done in the past or heard in the past? And if it does, then I would say maybe pay some attention and then go into remedy mode. What can I learn from this? What can I do differently as a result of receiving this feedback that's harping on the same theme?
Yeah. I This conversation made me think about how far I've come in the feedback
Yes, with
giving.
time and age, we get wiser, don't we now?
It's true. And especially after having a business,
Sure.
you learn to take feedback even better than you did because I'm telling you, those clients are vicious. Their feedback follows money.
Yeah.
If they don't like it, they're going to pull their money that comes along with it. So you start having a whole different perspective on accepting feedback, giving feedback, the output, the outcome of from that feedback, how it impacts you, how it impacts your business, how it impacts your family, just the tone you use when you're giving a feedback. I was telling you, my mother was always saying, I'm so disappointed in you. And I hated that. I hated that. I would rather get a whipping because it touches you emotionally when someone says that you're disappointing them. It becomes a personal thing as well, that on how you impact them. So I always try to think about that when I'm getting feedback, like what tactic or tone or words to say when I'm going to deliver that kind of important, constructive criticism that someone needs. But
Mhm.
I still go off the deep end at times, I've got to say. Sometimes I get the shanae roll in my neck. So what do you mean by that? What are you talking about? It's the denial. When you're in
It's
denial of
it's
something.
the denial, but I think also to remember that even as a leader, that there's a hierarchy of feedback, meaning that many times people attach feedback to the sender. So if the sender has power, has influence, has reputation, or if you have a personal relationship, like with your mom, with that person, that feedback tends to be at a higher level. It's more accepted. It's more, what is the word I'm looking for? It's more honored. I believe what that person is saying, as opposed to if you're a person who lacks the credibility, power, and influence, or if the relationship is broken or you don't have the relationship, you know how they say it goes in one in your ear and comes out the next ear, that they can hear you, but they're not going to necessarily do anything about it. And as you are also saying that in delivering the feedback is the how, the tone you use, but also the tactics that people sometimes use in delivering the feedback too. And I think it's always best to be authentically yourself and to try to ensure that the feedback is coming from a genuine place of interest, of betterment for the person and for the organization and for the outcome.
That's a good place to leave it.
I agree.
We could go on and on about feedback, boundaries, accepting boundaries of what you say, don't say. But I think that's a good place. We could probably do another podcast on that.
Agreed.
And my feedback to you is I think you did a great job in
Oh, thank you. I take that. And have my feedback to you. I thought it was great.
No, I hope everyone takes a little bit and put in a chat, if you want to make comments on this about times you've received feedback or if it was negative, how it impacted you, and if you've changed your thoughts about how you give and receive feedback. But until then, this is Sandy and Audrey's Primer Chats, and we hope we primed you up for a good feedback conversation. Have a
Until
great
next time. Bye-bye.